NBA Draft Week is finally here. What do you need to know about some of the top players in this draft? The big picture of who could rise and fall and what the draft ultimately looks like. Find out coming up on Locked On NBA Big Board. What's up? My name is Richard Stayman. You might know me better as MavsDraft over on Twitter. It's finally here. The draft is finally here. It is draft week. Today is Monday, June 24th. This is the first year where the draft is going to be a two-day event. Wednesday is the first round. Thursday is the second round. Interested to see how that'll shape up this year. But before we go into any details about that, just want to thank everybody who has been here since the end of Summer League last year or even before and wrote us out every single day of the year. It means a lot. We know the draft isn't exactly a hot topic come August or September when nothing is happening. But we appreciate everybody who's continued to listen and makes us your first listen, whether you're listening to for the first time today or you've been listening since last summer after the draft. We really appreciate you. That's coming from me, James, Rafael, and Leif, the entire network at Locked On. Really do appreciate it. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as playoffs wind down. The sports stop sporting like we want them to, but this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everybody every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right. So let's talk about this draft. I'm going to do this big picture, talk a little bit more specific, and gradually get more and more just deeper into this draft, into the weeds, right? So let's start at the top and just what the big picture of this draft looks like. It's been labeled as a weak draft, kind of rightfully so. For reference, I only have 26 first-round grades. An average year probably has 33 to 35, so it's pretty noticeable of a drop-off, right? So I think this year's draft is a weird one because of that, right? Like there's not that much talent there in the first round. I only have 51 draftable grades. It's pretty low. I could maybe make an exception for some depending on where they get drafted. Again, usually it's a little bit more. I have more draftable players than drafted at some point. So that's pretty normal. This year is absolutely abnormal. Now, a big reason why is if you look at it, let's just trace back 4 years ago what the hot topic was for a lot of these players. A lot of them were 8th or 9th grade, maybe 10th, depending on how old they were. But just about all these players were in high school or just starting college as the pandemic hit. So a lot of key development really was missed, especially for these top guys that are 18, 19, and 20 years old. That's key areas for development that are missed when the world shut down. They didn't get to be in the gym. The development and the training that they got, the coaching wasn't as readily available. That plays a massive role. Another thing is just sometimes down years happen. There's still a little bit of depth, but it's just not as good, I think, as really you kind of want to see in this, just after you're coming from a Wembanyama draft and we're already looking ahead to 2025, which is going to be loaded. Sandwiching it in there, it looks like you lose some depth. There weren't many guys that reclassified into this class. Gigi Jackson was supposed to be in this one, all rookie member, reclassified into last year. So that kind of stuff, it really threw off the rest of the draft. Now, who are the names at the top that you need to know and what is their range? Well, for the range, nobody knows on any player. We don't have a consensus, number one. And it's not even that we don't know who number one is. We don't know if Sarr will go to Washington at 2, Atlanta at 1, potentially even Houston at 3. We really don't know what could happen. And if he's not really a great fit in Houston, I think that's up for debate. If he isn't, he could fall to 4. Like, we just really don't know. And you can make that case down the list. Reed Shepard, Donovan Clingan, Ron Holland, Zachary Risachet, Stephon Castle. We just don't know where these guys are going to fall. And if you don't use ESPN Analytics as NBA Draft Day predictor, I highly recommend it. They do some fun stuff with this. So just looking at Alex Sarr, who is their number 2 player, he's projected to be number 2 at this point. Number 1, they give him a 20% chance. Number 2, they give him like almost a 70% chance. 3 is 5% or less, and 4 is not even 5%. So that says a lot. And you look at even Zachary Risachet, who's their number 1, they have him 70% chance at number 1. So, but like, this is a year where the only year I can remember this is 2022, where we had Chet Holmgren, Paolo Banchero, and Jabari Smith, who at the last minute was unseated by Paolo at number 1 pick, and then fell all the way down to 3. Chet was a safe number 2. We just didn't know what 1 and 3 would be. Donovan Clingan, though, I mean, just looking at his that ESPN Analytics does, they give him 5% chance roughly at number 1, very little chance, less than 2% at number 2, and then back up to 4 at 3. And then it goes to like 25% between 4 through 6, pretty much. 4, 6 is a little bit lower, but we just don't know where anybody goes. So what are these guys' games like? It's a great question that you metaphorically are probably asking, not metaphorically, just like indirectly asking, as I can't hear you doing this recording. There's a lot of different ranges. So just some guys that, like, I already named some of them, but Alex Sarr is the consensus number 1 player across the industry. Zachary Ricochet is right up there. Sarr is that ideal do-it-all big who he's mobile, he can shoot, he's athletic, right? That automatically gets you at the top of a draft, and most of the time, as long as you have a decent feel for the game, which he does. He's my number 1 prospect. I think he's still ultimately going to go number 1, and really, I would put him on a tier of his own. I would say I think he's the best player in the draft. Reed Sheppard is my number 2. I think he is a weird player to evaluate because he's 6'2", had a 40-inch vertical, but it was very clearly cherry-picked because you can do that with your standing reach. You take your standing reach, you have a lower bar to clear for a vertical. He did that, but still athletic. Monster shooter, shot over 50% from 3, got over 2.5 steals a game, almost a block a game. Look, he's not going to be a good on-the-ball defender, but he is going to make impacts just across the board. I think he could be like a Desmond Bane 3 years earlier, which is a really good player. So I have him number 2. Donovan Clingan's my number 3. He does it all in the paint, really protects the rim, finishes in the rim, at the rim in the paint, patrols the paint, makes it hard. He's a rim deterrer. He makes it hard for teams to go in the paint. Then I have Ron Holland at number 4, who is probably the biggest difference between where he's projected versus where I have him. According to ESPN Analytics, I really like this tool, by the way. So his range starts at 7. That's really where he's not projected to be a top 5 pick when he was the preseason number 1. He's now end of the lottery, maybe even outside of the lottery. 10 through 13, really 9 through 13 seems to be his wheelhouse. I think Utah should take the swing on him if they can. Just that do-it-all wing. Measured around 6'7". I've seen both 6'6", 6'8". I don't think he's quite 6'8". But he is a really interesting player because he could be a great defender. He plays hard. The jump shot looks like it could be something down the road, but right now he's a project. But I think he has a really safe path to being an NBA player because he could easily fall into like a Jaden McDaniels type of player. And in this draft, if you got that caliber of a defender and player who can contribute a little bit on the offense and play heavy playoff minutes, you got yourself a top 5 pick. I then have Rob Dillingham, who is just a dynamic shot creator, awful defender because he's 6'1" and very skinny, but he's going to change the way that an offense runs and makes it just scoring way off the chart compared to where they were before. So I really like him. And then you got Zachary Ricochet, he's a pure 3-and-D guy, 6'8", 6'9" wingspan, kind of poor relative to the body, but he just does a lot of different things to help winning basketball. He's never going to be your franchise changer. He's a really good 5th starter, though. I then have Stephon Castle. There are some shooting concerns there. That's what's holding him down, but monster defender, sees the floor very well. Loved him in high school. Floor general. I really like his game, and I think he's going to stick. He could be what Jared Culver was supposed to be. Culver was advertised as a point guard that could defend and potentially shoot. Never really got there as the point guard and never got there as a shooter. I think Castle has a much better chance. Then I have Dalton Connect. These are generally the top 8, I would say, that are pretty popular at the moment to go through. Dalton Connect's just a really efficient offensive player. He'll shoot. He can score. That's my top 8, and I think that's pretty much where I think things stop. These are the certified really good players in this draft, and there are definitely some others, but that's my big first tier. If I had to make one giant tier, Devin Carter's right in the mix. Nikola Topic was up there before the injury, and also I have some concerns about his jump shot, but beautiful, crafty finisher. There's a lot of different kinds of guys like that, but then it drops off for me. I'm not huge on Tijon Salon, who is generally mocked in this range. He's a high upside young forward who can do a lot of different things, but really has to learn basketball. And he could be this year's mystery player. And mystery generally is thrown as a international player, but he's not a mystery. He's playing in the highest division in France. There's tons of film on him, but mystery in terms of upside of what he could be, we just don't really know. His general game is raw, and it's going off of raw talent. That's something if you're a baseball fan, teams draft that raw talent and then they try and turn it into a baseball player. That was Andrew McCutchen. He lived off of pure talent. Then they crafted him into being like, okay, you have to be a smarter player, do these things to hit, to field, whatever it is, teach you how to play the game and just not rely on physical and talent tools, like physical tools and just raw talent. I think that applies to the NBA in some capacity as well. Tijon Salon is kind of that upside play that you could do that for. So that's kind of the big picture of that top 10. Those are a lot of the different guys that could go in there, but there's so many different names that are interchangeable. I think there's a lot of other players that are in the mix. I'll get to some of those as well in the risers and fallers and then second round steals. But let's talk about eBay Motors for just 1 second. Passion, drive, and patience. That's the formula for winning championships. And it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle, level it up to peak performance, superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts that you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. All right, back to your second segment. My name is Richard Stayman. Again, you might know me better as MavsDraft on Twitter. I'll flash that just for a second here in case you're new to the show. What I do is I do NBA draft scouting reports, NBA quality scouting reports, replicate what the NBA teams see and things like that. Also do community mocks. This is all on my Substack, mavsdraft.substack.com. You can find all my work there or my work from the past. I recently moved to Substack at mavsdraft.com. You can find all my stuff dating back to 2017. So been doing this is my 8th full draft cycle covering this publicly. I've been doing the draft work since really 2011. It's the first year I consider having done real write-ups and things like that. Just fun fact, actually, while we're on that subject, I had 2 of my biggest hits and, well, really my biggest hit and my biggest miss, I would say, in my time doing this is I had Kawhi Leonard as my number 4 player. Always thought that was a big hit. And then I also thought Kemba Walker wouldn't be NBA good. So sometimes that's just the nature of this. We're not perfect, but we do try and use our processes to get as many as we can, right? Good hit percentage, ideally 60%, I would say, maybe 70. Haven't done the math on that too deep, but I do think there are it's hard to be perfect in this industry, and it's really impossible. It's hard to even come close. Now, that being said, let's talk about some of these risers and fallers. I think the most obvious faller at this point is Nikola Topic. He had a partial tear. I want to say it's to MCL. I don't think it was the ACL, but it was something in his knee. I still have him as my 10th ranked player. His stock is going to fall. I think he was at one point before that considered a lock to go top 10. Now let's pull this back up, the analytic tool here, so that ESPN has. So Nikola Topic's draft stock, they have him as high as 4, but it's a 1% chance. Really, when you start getting into the serious chances, I would say like within 4% of each other, they have his range from 7 to 15. So he could go anywhere. Again, I think he was a top 10 staple for a while until this. He's one of those big fallers. Weirdly enough, another one, I don't agree with this, but I think just you have to follow the trends. Yves Missi. I don't understand why he's fallen. He's generally considered a 16 through 21 guy. Could see him going a little bit higher because he's very raw. Within the last few years, he started playing organized basketball like he was in high school. So within the last 4 years, not very good at seeing the floor, very raw, but he has some ball skills, rim runner, that kind of stuff sticks. And I do think that there's an upside play to be had with him and also making him just a rim runner. So variety of outcomes. I still have him in my top 16, 17. I'll admit I had him in my top 15, but just some few guys jumped above him. So it wasn't really anything he did wrong. But I think he's somebody else who is falling. One other guy who I think this player might have been hurt the absolute most by the Malik Monk re-signing him in Sacramento. He'd been universally mocked at 13, right? To the Kings. A lot of stuff had to do with, well, Malik Monk is a free agent. We don't know if he's going to leave. He's still the most popular mock draft pick is at 14. I just don't think that's a swing Portland takes personally. I don't think they're going to take any backcourt player in the top 14 unless Nikola Topic is there. He would be the only one because that upside is so high. I'm very against Portland taking a guard unless it is an absolute steal. So I think Jacoby Walter could be somebody who eventually falls. I'm not huge on his game. He has to be a really, really elite shooter to be more than an Isaiah Joe kind of player. And it's It's a little bit risky when you're giving a guaranteed contract in the top 20, right? Because that scales up so much more than even just 21 through 30. So I think he's somebody that could slip out at the top 20. But let's talk about risers. Baylor Shireman, I have him in my top 20. He was somebody that, if you've listened to our podcast throughout the combine in the last month and a half, Leif and I love Baylor Shireman. He's somebody who killed it in the scrimmages. And it's funny, his draft range on the ESPN analytics, the entire, I would say, like within 1 percentage point where it starts to drop. I mean, it could be anywhere from 23 to 38. One of the wildest stocks. And I feel like when that happens, you're likely to escape that 23 point. I'd like to see him maybe in Orlando. I mean, one of the most gifted offensive players in terms of well-roundedness and being he's a great shooter, really good rebounder, and he sees the floor very well. I think he makes his bigs better. Not a very good defender, but you can live with it. That's 6'6", do it all and have that elite trait. Could fully be what Joe Ingles is now, which also he's on Orlando. Could easily learn from him and add shooting right away as a plug-and-play guy. I think he's somebody that's risen a lot. I also really like Tristan da Silva. I've had him since 2022, early 22, I think, where his brother, Oscar da Silva, is somebody who I really liked. He's a lot better, though, because he has that elite skill. He's a shooter. He can see the floor very well out of drives. He rebounds. Defense, I think, needs some help, but there's a lot to like from him. I think he's a safe mid-teens pick. So like anywhere from 10 to 20, I would expect him to go. And he's risen a lot since the combine, where he was considered as a general guy who was picked in the 20s. One other guy who I think has, I have to say Ron Holland on this. Like he's one of the biggest fallers. Again, he fell from number 1 consensus preseason to maybe not even being picked in the lottery. And who knows where his stock is. He could easily fall back to, I'd say, as far as maybe the Lakers pick at 17. I think that's a stretch, but it is possible. Could still go as high as like Utah, right, at number 10. So I think that is something where that outcome would be interesting. Devin Carter's another one. There's been rumors that he has a promise. He's Anthony Carter's son, if you remember him in the NBA. Monster defender, grew a lot on the offensive end this year and became a real point guard, can shoot, has a weird shot, but I think there's something there where if he's even Jalen Suggs, you take him in the top 10, right? Like a little bit older, but has that level of an impact. We saw his first playoffs, Jalen Suggs, this year with Orlando. And I just feel like he's somebody that you have to pick in the top 10. He's a can't miss. I'd love to see him in San Antonio at number 8 with Victor Wembanyama, putting him having the best line of defense, second line of defense you can have, plus having a monster perimeter defender. I think that'd be fantastic. And the last player, this player I think has risen a lot, is Zach Edey. He could go as high. I mean, there's a report today that came out and said he could go as high as 7. He's not just a big. I think there's a lot of game that he has hidden from Purdue. And actually, one last one, Deron Holmes. I think he's a favorite of Draft Twitter. It's pretty speculated that he got a promise somewhere. We don't know where, but he's somebody that I think is going to rise on draft night and is a surefire first-round pick. So let's talk about some of these guys in the second round, though. We're making our way down the board. But first, let me tell you about FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want it to stop. I'm always in season. The worst week of the year for me is that All-Star week where there's 2 or 3 days of absolutely nothing happening. In MLB All-Star, I should say, where there's absolutely nothing happening across the board. It drives me nuts. But with the playoffs over, we get fewer games. And the sports aren't sporting like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everybody every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. All right, last segment here. Again, my name is Richard Stayman, aka MavsDraft on Twitter. I do NBA draft scouting reports, so this is all absolutely my favorite stuff right here, what I'm about to say. The second round, man. The second round, look, it may not be the best draft, but my range of second-round draftable players is 1 tier. I think it's all in a row, and I think they're all kind of interchangeable. There's a lot of players in this tier who will go in the first round. I personally, just some names I'm lower on Ryan Dunn, lower on Kel'el Ware, and I'm lower on Tyler Smith. I think these are guys who they have something there, but they're not quite ready to reach. So Kel'el Ware, I know he improved this at Indiana, but the motor has always scared me. The intel I've always received about it is just so negative. Now, some of that has changed. I think the Indiana people have said a lot of good things, which is very good for him. And I don't want to ever, I'm not rooting for this guy to fail or anything, obviously, but I just have my own doubts about something like that, where we've talked about this in past episodes, but motor, just sometimes you have it or you don't. It's not something you can grow into. And I just worry he could go potentially down the road of like a Larry Sanders. Now, that's a worst case scenario. I think in terms of NBA talent, he's there, but there's definitely some things he has to iron through. Again, it's a lot of just motor related stuff. And as a big, I think that's one of the biggest flags you can have. Some of the other guys that I'm a little bit lower on, though, Ryan Dunn, I just don't believe there's much offense there. I just don't think the defense can outweigh the offense. And then I also, look, Tyler Smith, same thing. I think he's an okay shooter, and he doesn't offer much elsewhere. And that, to me, very low on him for that reason. I think he's kind of fooled a lot of people because he had such a simple role as just a shooter and a help side defender in the G League that things didn't his holes kind of got overlooked. That's my 2 cents with it. But the second round picks this year are going to be really interesting. I think a lot of these guys may even get some of the first round looks. I have a couple consensus first round players in the second round grade, like Jacoby Walter. I'm pretty low on because I don't think he adds much else besides shooting. He's kind of rich man Isaiah Joe. Not even rich man, just kind of a slightly better version. And I just don't know how valuable that is in today's NBA to be a first round pick, to be honest, like fine in the second round. But Keyshawn George, I'm a little bit lower on just because I don't know what to make of him as a 20-year-old freshman that shot well, but there's kind of fool's gold flags, not necessarily will be, but he's an interesting one. But some players I'm higher on, I think, than most are. I love Anton Watson. I think he's one of the best connectors in this entire draft, just as a do-it-all forward who plays off-ball defense. He passes. He's not a big. He's not really much of a shooter, so that's really tough for him. But I do think he is somebody that could fully contribute to an NBA team and should get a second-round pick. Will he get drafted? Unsure. He's not even on the ESPN Analytics draft odds. So he might just be an undrafted steal. Another player I really like is Kevin McCullough, who ESPN lists as having the widest range I've seen so far, from 28 to 53. He's a do-it-all player at Kansas at this point, but in the NBA, he's not a do-it-all player. He can pass decently. I think that'll help. But his best trait is defense. He's an outstanding off-ball defender, really good on-ball defender, grew as a shooter, but still has a ways to go. Battled through some injuries throughout his time at Kansas. He probably projects well as a 3-and-D player. I think he's somebody that's really interesting. Oso Ighodaro at Marquette is an interesting player where he is a connecting five. He's not going to score a ton. He's not going to protect the rim, but he will make everybody around him better. He needs the right team, though. He needs to be somewhere like Golden State, for example. Golden State has that great off-ball movement. If you can find a system that thrives on off-ball movement, he is absolutely the guy. Some other deep-cut names, I really like Emmanuel Miller from TCU. I used to live in Dallas, so I've covered TCU for a while. And actually, that's why the background behind me is so bare. He just moved to the East Coast into Washington, D.C., so still filling some stuff out, but that's neither here nor there. But Emmanuel Miller, I saw him, though, over the last few years at TCU, and I really do like his game. Grew as a shooter this year, great work ethic. I know he worked out for the Mavs last week. I think he'd be a really good fit at 58 for them. Just some other guys in this range, Dylan Jones from Weber State. If you're into analytics, he is the only player in college basketball history, at least as far as Bart Torvik goes, back to which I think is 08, to have a 30% rebound percentage and 30% assist percentage. Defensive rebound, I should say. And that is extremely rare. Like, he did everything at Weber State. He's not that athletic, though. Shot is still a little bit away, but the indicators seem pretty strong that he'll just improve quite quickly. I really like his game. Some other sleepers, let's just do a couple rapid fire here. Enrique Freeman's rising. He is so interesting. 6'7", 7 foot plus wingspan. Was a walk-on at Akron 4 or 5 years ago. Got to school on an academic scholarship, transferred over to having a basketball scholarship at Akron. And he went from Portsmouth to the G League Elite Camp to the NBA Combine. So he climbed all the levels. He's really intriguing because of that. Needs to shoot to stick, but has a lot of defensive versatility. Another player who did that too is Isaac Jones. He's from Washington State. He hadn't even crazier story. He's loading trucks for a bit. He's 6'8", 6'9", so kind of undersized as a big, but he took a break from basketball, was loading trucks, went to JUCO, went to Idaho, and then went to Washington State. Every single place he's gotten better every year. So he's all Pac-12 this year, and his only year in the Pac-12. He was really impressive in the Big Sky. And then he did what Enrique did. He also went from Portsmouth to G League to NBA Combine Camp. And I think those kind of guys you have to take the swing on. So those are a couple others. I'm going to see if I can maybe find one more on my big board that's maybe worth mentioning as well here that I really like. Just some interesting names. Malavi Leons. He's a Dutch kid who was at Bradley, 6'8", 7+ wingspan, really great defender, great athlete. But the jump shot has improved, has shown a little bit of more consistency throughout the pre-draft process. I think he could be a candidate to squeeze into the end of the second round. The thing with this year, though, is like normally my board goes 120 deep, and with mine, I like to rank players that I think could really play real minutes in the G League, right? Like at some point, if they're going to play in Summer League, G League, I want to have notes on them. I'll at least rank them. It's sometimes maybe not as serious as the other guys, but I do think there are some guys that don't get touched at all in this process that end up having careers. I mean, even last year, Dexter Dennis, I was the only person who ranked him in their top 100. I had him in my 70s. He earns a two-way, played a couple of minutes for the Mavs, but like he may not have panned out, but he was there. He's still in the G League and he's still figuring it out. That's why I kind of like this. Anybody who I've seen at a deep level that is draft eligible, I try, and that I think has a real chance, I try and rank them. But this year I only have 107 names on my board. Usually I finish with 120 plus. It says a lot about this draft. The quality is poor, but the next few years we're on track to have a fantastic, really strong few drafts, right? The 2025 draft is full with Cooper Flagg, Ace Bailey. 2026 has AJ DeBonsa, and if you're ready to feel old, it's a lot of NBA legacies, the Boosters, the Richardsons. It's a loaded class. And then every year after, you're going to hear more and more NBA legacy names. So if you weren't prepared for that, I'll drop one other name that could be a second-round pick. Really undrafted free agent, but Jameer Nelson Jr. just finished his 5th season in college, and he's a really good defender. He'll play in the G League as well. Just look for those NBA legacies. But going forward, obviously, more drafts will be a little bit deeper. But we're going to be talking all week. I'm going to have James and Leif on as well, talking about some of the what-ifs of this upcoming draft in just a couple of days and what would happen if these weird scenarios, which are bound to happen, do come into place. So appreciate everybody who continues to listen. We'll be back tomorrow.